YouTube launched a new video network yesterday where you can watch other people play video games. For real, the whole network. It's called the We Should All Be Very Ashamed of Ourselves for Failing as Parents channel.
But can it truly be a spectator sport?
It already is. 71 million watched it last year. They reckon it's going to, by 2017, it'll be 145 million people watching it. I have this argument all the time. People are like, oh, no one wants to watch anyone play video games. That's so boring. League of Legends, I think there was about 18,000 people in the stadium live, and then 32 million watched the final.
Wow.
This is what kids are doing. This is what people want to see.
You know, it's lasering and you're there, but I don't know if athlete is the right word that I would go for.
If you don't break a sweat, I don't consider it a sport.
Are esports really sports? This has been a question that's been asked since the beginning of time, or I guess since the beginning of my life on this planet. In my well-versed experiences both in the world of traditional and esports, I've come to the conclusion that esports should in fact be treated as a sport. And while you may disagree with my take now and maybe even after this video ends, my hope is that you'll likely at least have a better insight on the matter, as I've noticed a lot of the distaste for esports stems from a lack of understanding of what esports is. In this video, I will be addressing what I consider to be the leading arguments against esports, so without further ado, let's dive into it. For starters, let's take a look at what I argue to be one of the most common misunderstandings about esports. Esports is just people who get paid to play video games. Now, I'm certainly not going to dispute that esports players are playing a game, because after all, that's kind of what esports is. But what this statement severely undermines is the immense complexity of said games, not to mention the fact that, like regular sports, these players are the best, most trained, and most studied of the game's player base, which in some cases can reach hundreds of millions of players. For this video, I'll be primarily using League of Legends esports scene for reference, as it is the current leading esports scene across the world and by far the one I'm the most knowledgeable of. So first, let's address the idea of a video game being complex. Though most people do understand that games have evolved past arcade machines or simple gameplay loops, some don't know much about the current state of games today and the depth they have, which if they don't keep up with current leading esports titles, I don't blame them. At the time of writing this script, League of Legends has 162 characters or champions in the game, and for the most part, each character has 4 abilities plus a passively active ability. So to simply understand each character in the game, you need to know roughly 810 different abilities, what they do, and how they all interact with each other, not to mention how these abilities traditionally combo together, how long their timings are between usages, damage output, and the list goes on and on. And for a better representation of what I mean by this, in a recent segment on the American League of Legends circuit, it took 5 minutes for 3 professional players combined to calculate the damage of one ability hitting one champion in the game, and they still didn't correctly account for everything happening. And keep in mind, this is an example of one single interaction in a game where potentially thousands of these exact same type of interactions can occur, and some of them are even more complex than what was just broken down. As you can imagine, comprehending an inhuman amount of numbers, stats, along with many other factors that are always changing is an absurdly difficult task. However, this is what allows a very small fraction of players to stand out amongst the others across a large variety of games and not just exclusively League of Legends. Basically meaning that this very likely isn't just some college student who casually games with his buddies. And kind of building off this argument, we have the common criticism that esports players often face, that they just sit in front of a mouse and keyboard and screen all day instead of getting outside and getting strenuous activity like you may with soccer or baseball. That is of course how the games are designed to be played, as they wouldn't be possible on other mediums due to the freedom that the digital world provides. But ultimately, what games lack in physical activity, they certainly make up for mentally. And though obviously from a spectator point of view we're unable to see a team work together through coordination, strategies, and other mechanics, it doesn't necessarily make them absent from the field of play. For reference, chess is a game that's widely viewed as a sport all across the world. There of course isn't much physical activity in chess, but we still consider it a sport nonetheless. And yet, when a game that can be compared to a form of digital chess is played with a similar amount of physical activity, some people no longer see that as a sport despite its qualities being nearly identical. And while I personally see it as highly flawed reasoning, to those who still may argue that esports being on a screen makes it disqualified from being an actual sport, remember that sports are defined by the competition and not the medium. And as for the topic of esports teaching poor habits, I feel like a lot of this comes from the very common stigma of the gamer locked in the basement with a soda in one hand and stench reeking off of them. However, even though there are of course players who are going to do that, a large number of leading esports organizations do strongly advocate for going to the gym, getting outside with others, playing music, or any other form of mental and physical self-care. And while we've compared esports to chess already, what about addressing some of the more mainstream sports like basketball or soccer? These are of course just a couple of games that people are readily able to accept as being a sport. A large part of this argument is that these are highly physical, endurance testing, and impressive feats. But the issue with comparison to esports is that esports competition deviates from this style and focuses more on strategy, constant analysis, and thinking. But that exact reason is why I feel esports is more comparable to something like motorsports. Motorsports work with operating machinery for the heavy lifting, and while sure there is undeniably more physicality in these competitions than esports, never have I heard someone say F1 racing isn't a sport because anyone can drive a car. Because as I'm sure most of us would agree, F1 racing is a lot more than that. But I feel as if there's almost a double standard for esports, as people will take it at its most basic level and then apply that logic to the entire industry. Well, baseball is just hitting a ball hard with a stick and soccer is just kicking a ball in the net. Both of these are obviously complete oversimplifications that devalue the absurd complexities that the games offer, so I question why is it so hard to address esports the same way. A common rebuttal that I see against the point of esports is that it's not as large as other traditional sports may be. And this is a totally understandable argument because after all, esports has only become a growing thing over the past couple of decades, so naturally by comparison it's still in its infancy. But according to this study of American sports posted by Syracuse in 2018, esports was projected to overtake every major sporting scene in the country in terms of viewership with the exception of the NFL. But hold on, wait, this survey was taken 5 years ago, why are you still using it in 2023? Well, this is to actually make the fight more even for traditional sports, as during the pandemic, while regular sports had an unexpected and arguably unfair tanking in viewership numbers, esports skyrocketed. So if we do want to count those years, it would actually be even more esports favored. However, I opted for projections as it better reflects the regular year's consistent growth. And turning away from the viewer perspective for a moment to the teams themselves, some esports organizations are actually worth more than ones for Major League Soccer teams. Players for these teams are given contracts sometimes in the millions of dollars, and their competitions have more than easily sold out stadiums in minutes in the cases of important matches. And like a dad screams at a football team, I've screamed pretty loud at these events too. Ultimately, even if you disagree with my take on esports entirely, I do hope you understand the inarguable significance that they have in our world today, because whether their sporting nature may be up for debate, its size and impact certainly isn't. These are of course just some and certainly not all arguments against esports, so if you do have any further questions or commentary you want to give, feel free to do so respectfully down in the comments below. All of this is of course just my own personal take, and I totally understand where the opposition is coming from, and I will respect your opinion as well. But whether you agree with my opinion or not, I do hope you enjoyed the content regardless, and if you did enjoy it enough to consider subscribing, that would be pretty awesome as well. So that being said, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night. I'll see y'all in the next video. Later!